You've tuned into InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, where you can check in for your dose of stigma-breaking, humor-filling, motivation-loving life hacks and empowerment tips for all of the medically adultish people in life. As you know, I'm Dominique Vale, founder of InvisiYouth and host of the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, and today is Season 4, Episode 56. I can't believe we're getting through the 50s now on this. And today's episode, we're going to get virtual and talk about our digital footprint a little bit that we all are leaving. And as everyone knows, I'm not the most tech savvy, so I had to bring someone on who knows a bit more about this topic than me for all of you to learn from and enjoy for sure. So I am thoroughly excited to get to bring on our guest, who is a wonderful chronic illness influencer and educator, Mariah Michelle, who you all would know if you look her up as Mariah from Magnolia Hill House. Living in California, Mariah was in front of the camera a lot as a model and then had different health struggles end up happening and ended up developing different chronic illnesses like a form of POTS and EDS, among other things. And through that chronic illness process, Mariah then switched a lot of her work to adapt to that, which we are fortunate for in her coming into our community. If you look at Magnolia Hill House on TikTok, which is where a lot of her wonderful platform is, you'll get to see that Mariah not only has, I'm getting these numbers correct, 454,000 followers and 12.7 million likes and counting, because this card was written not in the present moment. Mariah shares not just about living life with chronic illnesses, but all the things that she enjoys, such as renovating her home, life with her husband, gardening, beauty, and all the best medical equipment out there for us to know about, which we know I thoroughly enjoy. With Mariah, the way we were introduced to her was through a wonderful creative process she developed called FloralFridays, where Mariah gets to bring her signature style of daily joy every week to her audience with not only an added flair of a signature beautiful looks that you'll see and a British accent, which, as you guys know, I thoroughly enjoy. So with Mariah, she's really framed her work in what is kind of called a manageable joyfulness of life with chronic illness. And that's something we want you guys to learn from, and from Mariah's expertise being in the virtual space that she's in, and especially the world she's cultivated with her platform with Magnolia Hill House. So Mariah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
It's going to be. Oh, thank you. We usually have our guests saying, "Oh, that's a nice introduction." I'm like, that's my favorite part.
I'm very flattered.
And before we get into the show, guys, remember, before we jump into our first segment, to hit the subscribe and like button while you are listening or watching this, wherever you are. That definitely helps us out. And, you can listen and watch this while you do that. You have a whole hour to click that button for us, and we appreciate it. So, as always, we're going to jump into our first segment, which is Teeniatric's Way of Life.
Teeniatric Way of Life.
Teeniatric's Way of Life not only is partly our trademark, but also a way that we talk about living daily life as a young person with chronic illness or disability, and especially for that millennials and Gen Zs that are a part of InvisiYouth, is really harnessing that digital footprint that we're all creating, whether we want to or not. So for us, this whole segment we're really going to dedicate is chatting about our online lives and how to kind of make sure we're using them in a way that we're not draining ourselves and our health at the same process. So that's where we're going to jump in with Mariah on this topic. So I know I had mentioned at the top that you are what would be called a chronic illness influencer as your platform of work. So for you, is there a favorite portion and a least favorite portion of being in that space of work?
So my favorite is definitely just seeing how many people feel seen, because that's my whole thing that I care about most. I grew up being gaslit a lot medically. And so just to create a really safe place where people are like, oh, yes, and they feel safe to say things, or I'm feeling this, or their symptoms, their emotions, any of that stuff, just creating that space and feeling successful at this point, that a lot of people do feel seen, that's my favorite part. Least favorite part, every once in a while, you can tell someone about a symptom or a condition and they just feel like they're the doctor, and that could just be a little bit much. And I get it, because we do have the access to healthcare is not great. Sometimes the doctors aren't great. And so I know we do have to take that burden of educating ourselves a lot. And I know there are a lot of people who don't take that. So, if someone's like, oh, well, I learned about this, and sometimes it's really helpful, but sometimes it's just like, read the room. That's not what's happening. That it's just, there's a lot of doctors on TikTok, apparently, and that can be a little bit much, because it's like, that's not what we're talking about right now. So that's my least favorite part.
It is. It's that always, I'm wondering where everyone is hiding their PhDs and their time to get one sometimes.
Yeah, it's great. It's like, wow, good job, everybody. We're all so smart collectively, but don't have jobs. This is great.
No, it's so true. I love how you mentioned that, because I know for us that always will be, it's always a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to sharing your chronic illness, whether it's doing it like yourself in a professional manner or doing it in an activism space, or even just part of your illness or disability is visible. So naturally, if you're on your Instagram, it's going to be apparent to anybody who would notice that you have an illness or disability. So you're kind of always towing the line of the unsolicited advice that you have to be in the mood for it, I say. Is you can never say yes or no, because sometimes it's nice to get. Other days, you're just not in the mood for it, and you're like, please do not tell me about what your aunt's cousin's nephew sister did that one time.
Yeah, you do. You have to be in the mood for it, because it's like, all right, here we go. With a stranger sometimes too. You're like, okay.
Yeah, and especially even with that too, with you doing it in more of a professional format. I know I had mentioned it to you when we chatted before, but we'll always hear from our young population that sometimes it can feel like the chronic illness Olympics, I'm putting it in air quotes, where you're sort of, in a way, you're sharing about your health, but because it can then boost your following or you professionally, you then feel like you're competing through your illness with other people who are in the same market. So for you, is that something you've ever felt in a way of you needing to share more or less, and whether that would kind of feel like you're balancing your own scale of, I'm not sure if I want to, but I know professionally I should, and how do you kind of like navigate that mindset?
So I have the very nice privilege that my husband's income does support us. So I don't have to do this for a living. It's really nice, because I like having my own income. I've had a paycheck since I was 3. And so when I had to stop working, I was like, I can't be dependent on someone. So that was a whole thing we had to work through. And so you kind of funnel that privilege, and it's just what I want to do, and it's just what's genuine to me, and I'm not going to force anything at any point, because I don't need to. And I like the way that comes across more as like there's not a desperation behind it, because I am in a position where I don't need it. And so I just kind of let it be flow and genuine and organic where it can be. There are times where I know where I'm kind of like, oh, am I pandering? And then if I feel that way, I'll just fully delete it or something, is usually what I try to do, is just to keep it very, like the other day I used my toes to pick up the hose from our carpet cleaner. And I was like, oh, that's funny. That is something I do. And I did post that, because I was like, that was something I organically did. And I was like, oh, this is funny. People know what this is. And so I try to have it be from an organic place. If it's something that happened off camera, and I'm like, oh, wait, no, that's real. And then go from there.
Yeah, and I love how you mentioned too, it's sort of you indicating to yourself, like it is very instinctual when you feel like you're doing something a little bit more performative, or, okay, I saw somebody else sharing this and that got a lot of interaction. So, but I've dealt with that too. So let me show the same thing. And then it be, when you start to, as I say, put all of those wheels together, it can feel less, like you said, less genuine to yourself, and like you're trying to then stick with a trend where we'll always say if your illness is a part of what you like to share, and even if it is just part of your social media, it's that hand in hand of you don't want to always rely on the negative or flare-ups of your illness as part of it can be elements of it. And if those happen to be, unfortunately, the spikes of interaction in your algorithm, which as we say, it's the car accident on the other side of the road reaction that everybody loves to see it, but doesn't want it to happen, for sure. But it's just like you said, it's sort of organically knowing what matters to you in terms of what you would, if you immediately feel like, I'm not really sure about this, even sort of saving that in your drafts and then moving on and thinking of something else would even be a good idea. So you don't feel like you're constantly, because us having energy is you don't want to lose all of the different content you're making, but maybe feel more genuine and realistic to you at a different time than it does in the actual moment. And I think
I like to let them lay for a little bit and then revisit them with new eyes and be like, yep, no, I still like that. That's still good. Here we go.
Yeah. I always will say it's when you feel like you're in the competition realm, you have to take a bit of a step back and reevaluate, because I always will say, as much as it benefits you in one way, your health kind of unfortunately is the driver and you are the passenger at moments, and you kind of gotta not want it to like drive through the cones at all times because it helps you out.
Absolutely.
And even on your end too, because you share so much of different aspects of your life, would you feel like, are there ways that you feel you are able to kind of put boundaries up of things that you don't share or what you would share? And how does that kind of play into the dividing of your personal space and your virtual space?
I would say the boundaries are kind of what they need to be. The only intentional boundary I set is my mental health, and my real life has to come before anything on social media. But at the end of the day, I'm an open book. And so there's really nothing I don't feel comfortable discussing. There are a couple things every once in a while I'll get a DM if it like might be something like a more adult or like a sexual question where like I maybe wouldn't post about that just because my husband would be like, please don't do this, because he is very much the introvert in our marriage, and he's very shy, like has no social media whatsoever. So it's one of those, that's a little boundary of if I think my husband would be embarrassed or like there's too much. But other than that, at the end of the day, if there is something I can offer or, a conversation, shed light on something, and it can impact one person positively, then I'd be like, you know what, whatever, who cares? We're having the conversation. Because again, it's about being seen and heard. And I'm very confident in myself. And so like, if I can't talk about this, I don't know who else would. So I kind of sift through, but yeah, the boundary is just as long as I feel okay and I feel right with it, then we're good.
Yeah. And I think in a way too, it's giving yourself that independence of, we'll always say people are afraid to use no and just say no to questions, or you feel obligated if you answer 9 of the 11 questions in your comments that those 2 people are going to get mad at you. But at the same token, it is your platform that they are coming on to. So it is your choice to, I say, make that adult decision of when you don't want to answer a question. I know we've done that with having more volunteers being a part of our social media. My whole team and I made the decision of, we don't really answer any comments unless it's a needed question about our resources, because it became back and forth of which volunteers were comfortable or not comfortable. So we said, okay, across the board as a nonprofit, we're just going to like some comments. And then if it's a question on programming, we'll answer. Otherwise, even if it's a very nice comment, we won't engage. And that's sort of for everyone. So we can make sure any volunteer coming in feels a comfort that they're able to engage as much as they're comfortable. Because a lot of times it is that I don't know, would I answer this? And especially if you know the person in the comments, I really don't want to answer this, but we know each other. So how do I tell you no?
Yeah. It's like, I'm just going to message you privately about it.
It is. It's that sort of, how do you handle sort of like that? And if you've gotten comments on a TikTok and it might be a bit more of a passionate or even negative comment that people are bringing up? Because I would imagine that obviously happens to everyone. But for you, how do you kind of handle when it's the people kind of rely on the anonymity of their virtual name and space to kind of say what they would want to say? How do you kind of not let it affect you so much of that being sometimes so negative?
Yeah. I would say I feel bad. Like if it is something negative, my thought process is I probably wouldn't respect the way that person goes about their life, because that's a standard I hold myself to. Is I would never sit there and like I wouldn't do that to someone. And so I just remember like, ooh, like I would never hang out with them. I would never allow them in my house. If I saw them down the street and they're walking by, like I just wouldn't. And I know that's a really hard balance for a lot of people, but for me, it's just like I've just kind of coached myself into it of like, why would I care? Like, I don't want your life. I don't think I like you very much. And then you're getting like, you came to me. You're on my page. I didn't find you. Like you stepped in to my world and now you want to be mad? Like just scroll. So I just kind of tag it. I was like, that's an emotionally immature person. And I don't need to do that with my life. But I honestly, I can, last December, I did post one about POTS, and it was like it wasn't meant to go viral, but it does, and it was like 13 million people saw it, and it was like, eh, and like there was a lot of people like, just get over it. POTS isn't that bad, and it was just like, that one annoyed me quite a bit. But other than that, I bet like 15 comments in total that I've ever seen. My husband and my mom will both be going through like, my husband's like, everyone's so nice. So fortunately, I feel like the community that has formed is just really good people. So I just don't feel that I get that as much. As I'm still shocked. I'll look at the comments and be like, oh no, everyone's still really lovely. So another day of good TikTok karma. Here we go.
TikTok karma. I like that.
Yeah.
But it is like you said, it's true. I know even a big thing we'll say is if you can tell that more and more time goes on that the comments is bothering you, or you feel that like pre-anxiety, as we say, before you look at them, we'll always say, have somebody in your family or friend group look at them first. Be like, I'm not going to read any of them. You check them out first. And if you give me the green light, or you say like, oh, hey, there's a couple people I would just like ignore. But then at least it kind of gives you that separation. You kind of get pre-warned or not, and it can help you take that kind of anxiety away of. But I like how you said I think I'll use it as a mental phrase. If I wouldn't allow them in my house to hang out with me, I shouldn't care about how they're writing to me in the same way, because they don't really know.
No, and like TikTok is a whole platform, but that's my space. Like you're here, just go away if you don't like it. That's not the vibe we're going for. So sometimes I'll just type out and be like, this is just a poor show of your character. I hope you have a better day. And it's an honest thing, but I realize that like really people are like, like, ugh, is that your character you're choosing to show? Yikes. And then it's kind of a neutral call out. And then people are like, oh, and I'm like, I am a person. I do read the comments. And then I've had a lot of people backpedal and I'm so sorry. And I know I do. And oh my gosh. Like, okay, well, my name's on the account. Move along.
Even on has there been sort of, to end this segment, I was curious for you, is there a way that sort of before and after your health that you might have used social media differently, or how do you, for you on, because I know you and I have similar health symptoms as well and diagnoses at different times. So how do you kind of handle when you are in those boundaries of your health, of you knowing like, oh, I'm feeling like I'm going to be having a flare up or I'm dealing with something? How do you kind of set those boundaries of your social media usage that you would tell other people, oh, this has really worked for me to kind of navigate not disappearing for 2 months at a time?
Yeah. It's hard. Even right now I haven't posted since Friday, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Cause basically I was really sick when we were living in the hotel during the renovation, and there was probably mold or something. So I was getting actively sick, and that was great. But basically, since I think it was like August, I haven't been consistently posting, and it just is what it is. But for me, what I remind myself when I have that moment of like a little bit of pressure, like I have to put something out there. And then I remind myself that the app could get deleted tomorrow, and how silly for me to have negatively impacted my health, which is my long-term goal, for short-term gratification of like, okay, but I got some likes today. It's like, okay, well, no, like my ultimate goal is to be healthy. My ultimate goal is not, like this is all gravy and this is fun and I love it. And it is professional for me, but I still try to keep it as a hobby in my mind as far as priorities so that I'm not prioritizing above anything else. And so, yeah, for me, I keep being like, oh, I could try to post something. And I'm like, I'm not healthy enough. I'm exhausted. It's not gonna be good content anyways. Like I'm not feeling well. Like I'm not capable of putting anything out good anyways. Then I don't want to put something out that I don't feel passionate about or find funny, or if it doesn't move me, I'm not going to do it. And if I'm too sick, it's just not happening. So I just, yeah, very much I'm like, if it got deleted tomorrow, would it have been worth the amount of energy I put into it today? Probably not. And then I just move forward and take a nap and drink some water. To just try to I'm very big into keeping the perspective of it is social media. And could be, there's people calling for it all the time to get banned because it's from China. And so I'm like, heaven forbid I, hurt myself and then the app literally goes away. So I just keep that in the back of my mind whenever I feel like I'm trying too hard or that it is real world and it is real people. But at the end of the day, my health is the real thing. So we stay in that lane.
Yeah, I think, like you said, that's a really good point to end that one on, is that you do kind of, in a way, keep the lane separate of your actual physical body of what you're dealing with versus what you're sharing about what you deal with on the same ways, kind of keeping that separate so you can always manage what you're physically dealing with as the priority. And I always say I was going to have a cool transition into our commercial. Didn't happen. Thought about it. So we're just jumping into the commercial. Everybody.
I love it.
You know how I love to do this. As always, we know we're officially getting into end of the year, holiday season for everyone. And with that comes some holiday shopping for everybody. And what better way to shop than shopping in a way that gives back to charity? So we obviously you'll see it popping up next to me in a photo if you're on our YouTube channel, is our InvisiYouth charity shop, where we have our first item, our Subtle Activist color block bracelet that is made by young people with chronic illness and disability and also shipped through them as well. And it shows our signature gray and yellow colors. It's 100% of all of your purchase is donated to funding our free resources and programming we provide for young adults with chronic illness and disability every month. And it's a fun, as we say, cool and subtle way to support a nonprofit without it being our name and slogan on a big t-shirt. It's your way of subtly supporting a charity in a very chic and fashionable way for only $4, with now free global shipping because of the holiday season. So think of it as making a small donation to a charity and you get a fun bracelet in return for yourself or someone you care about. So we'll put our Etsy store link below where our bracelets are exclusively at, and we hope to get some of your orders soon as well, so you can be a subtle activist alongside the rest of us in your time. And going off of that, we are going to be empowering you to buy our bracelets and also our next segment, which is to Empower with Laughter.
Empower with Laughter.
As you guys know, I thoroughly enjoy having a good laugh and a giggle, and I'm always sarcastic. So my sarcastic humor had to become a segment. So naturally, with Empower with Laughter, I'm going to be chatting with Mariah about ways that you can feel empowered in your day-to-day and be motivated in all the different facets of your daily life. So you're not sort of stuck in the box of what is quote unquote normal living with chronic illness and disability, and you can kind of find ways to bring that joyfulness into each of your days. So one of the first things I was going to bring up, and this is probably a very selfish question, so as a host, probably shouldn't be asking it, but I'm sure somebody listening or watching is curious as well, is I had mentioned at the top that you have your Floral Fridays that you do on your TikTok. I was not joking that there are beautiful oversized hats, phenomenal clothes. You guys know I care about the fashion of everything, and a British accent with some joyful mantras. So for you, kind of how did that whole combination of everything come together? I have to I have to know, especially where did the whole thing, including the let's add an accent, all sort of into one?
So we have gorgeous flowers here. The lady who lived here before actually passed away, but her dying wish was gardens. And so she got it. And so I was just like, I just want to go pick these flowers. And I had this dress from Reformation, and it kind of was a little like medievally looking. And I was like, I should just wear that in a garden. And I was like, but it's white. And I was like, but I have a washing machine. So I just put it on. And then I was like, this would be good content probably. Like I was going to do it and not even film it. And then I had these really cute shoes. And I was like, well, if I'm going to wear a white dress, I should have something practical. And that would be my little gardening boots. And then the hat, I bought that hat like 3 years ago. And I was like, that's a good hat. I never get to wear that enough. So it just became outfits I wanted to wear that I don't get to wear enough. And I actually did the first Floral Friday in my normal Midwest accent. And I went to go finish it and I was like, oh, would it be too terribly annoying if I did this in a British accent? Because I think it was 2 or 3 weeks prior when I think I was at like 200,000 followers at that point, which was still just like very aggressive. And I don't know how it happened. And I was like, God, if I would have known I would have had the success, I would have faked an accent and just gaslit everyone into being like, that doesn't sound real. That's very confusing to me. And I made a video about it and 10,000 people saw it. And everyone was like, why don't you just start now and we'll all pretend, delete the video. And so like everyone just like staged this. I was like, I mean, like if you guys are going to go with it, far be it for me to stop it. Cause there were like a couple hundred comments. And I was like, I think we're doing this. And I remembered that. And so I was like, oh, they're all gonna remember. Here we go. And so then I did the whole thing over in a British accent and everybody pulled through. But because the algorithm does pick up on accents, it sent it over to the UK. And so it changed all my analytics because I had 10,000 people from the UK follow me, which I was like, oh, this is the ultimate scheme. And I was super happy. And then I just kept doing it though. And then I would get comments and still probably a couple of times a week, people be like, are you not British? No. And I have a friend who I met in August at a party and her husband, she's only shown him Floral Fridays and she has only told him I'm British. And so she was like, I have to tell you, like, we don't know each other well, but I think we're going to be friends. And if we have dinner, when we have dinner, I have not told my husband you are from Nebraska. And so if we could just keep this going. And I was like, oh yeah, we're good friends now. This'll work. And so just kind of evolved and it's fun. And I grew up on British TV for some reason because my grandma, that was her thing. So it just kind of happened and I just keep doing it because I'm having a good time.
No, and I love that it's sort of like it like snowballed because like you can tell you're having a good time when you're doing it. And you can kind of get lost in the whole ambiance that you set for your audience, but you are saying like actually you're not just like reading a mantra card out for an audience to listen.
No.
Like it is very joyful in a way that's not like self-helpy, which we thoroughly appreciate because for you is what I kind of like on a twofold. What does it provide you to feel joyful for yourself and what you noticed is joyful for your audience as they get to watch it?
Yeah, well, I've noticed it's kind of like when you're in the turbulence and the mask falls, like you have to put the mask on yourself before you help someone else. And so I've just found if I am genuinely happy, it translates really well. And people be like, I'm just smiling watching this. Or some people like, I cry every time you turn around and say this because I just like, oh, it's the first time I've taken a breath this week. And it's just one of those things that like I have to genuinely feel it. And so there was a day that this construction was awful. And I was like, I'm not in a good mood and I'm not going to do this. And I just sat there and I went and got Starbucks and I got a little strawberry frappuccino. And then I came back and they had all stopped being loud and obnoxious. And I was like, and here we go. Now I'm feeling it. And then I went right back into it. But it's just one of those things like I don't script them and I don't really know what I'm going to say until then because I don't want it to be a performative like play, like, oh, here we go. So it's just like, if I feel like saying something in the moment. And so I like to keep that organic part of it of I might have an idea of, oh, like that would be something good to touch on probably, but I don't know how I'm going to do it until I do it. And then I just like, well, and then I edit it together. Like, that's, I guess, what we're doing today. Then I just like to keep the organic, genuine part of it because I think that's what matters. I think a lot of people overproduce and over commercialize and everything feels fake. And I think people can feel that like, oh, this actually might be not totally fake. Like, yeah, I'm Nebraskan, but the accent's super fake. But everything else is very like, this is just what I felt like doing today. And I'm excited to do it. So yeah.
And I love that it's like levity, like how you mentioned it too. It's something that for people with chronic illnesses, especially, or dealing with disability and not having accessibility available to you in your day to day, levity is not something that is easily given to us without us doing a lot of work to have the levity brought to us. So for you to find a way that works for your health, that you're able to get joyfulness out of it and fun, and then that translates to the people getting to watch you, that they get to have fun in this like little world that you've brought for yourself, that they then get to be curious about what you'll be wearing and what you'll be saying for them. It's a duality of that, something that we'll always say, if you can find something, even if it is the most, what you would think is like unrealistic thing for you to do for yourself, but it brings you that total separation from your health that you're dealing with, that it's just so a tangent to what you would normally do professionally as well. Like you're not a professional botanist or anything. Like I'm these flowers.
I know nothing about it. I just know they grow and they look pretty, so I cut them.
And even how for you, because like I had mentioned in the beginning, it's your platform really is about sort of manageable joyfulness and putting that in your days. So for you, when you're having a flare up or you're having sort of bouts of bad portions with your health, how do you still try to infuse that joyfulness into your day?
Something I do, it's very weird, but I kind of embody Dorothy from Golden Girls when I'm super duper sick because it just works for me. My husband doesn't love it. Because I get some good one-liners in there. Because when you don't feel well, it's like I don't want to be happy or joyful, but I like being witty still. So I'll just get some zingers going in there, and just kind of like channel through that. Because I'm like, oh, that was funny. It wasn't super nice, but killed that one. But like my husband's really good at we were best friends for a year before we even dated. And so we very have similar senses of humor, and he hates when I'm sick, obviously, because he's like, oh, that sucks. And so he's really good at like he works super long hours. And so he'll come home at the end of the day. And if I'm super sick and he kind of pick up on that and I'm like exhausted, and he'll just start making little jokes. And it kind of reminds me of like, I can still have joy even if I feel super sick. And so for me, it's kind of like, I don't have to match, my personality does not have to vibe completely with what I'm going through, but I don't always have that energy. But sometimes it's just nice to remember, because when I get really sick, you kind of turn in on yourself a little bit. And there's this like little snail shell of like, I don't feel good and all this stuff. And then you kind of forget, like, I can do both. I've made jokes while throwing up one time, and it's not always easy to do. It's not always fun to do, but
it's when your best content comes forward.
It's when you got it, do it. Or like when I have my adrenaline attacks, I mean, sometimes they can last for an hour where I'm just like fully screaming, and they're not emotional, which is really hard to tell people because I'm like, I don't know they're coming and there's no anxiety around them. It's just my adrenaline is really high. And something that we found as kind of our protocol is my husband will tell me jokes or say silly things, which we can't do in public. And I rarely have them in public, but people are like, this guy's an asshole. Like,
someone is not taking care.
What I want him to be doing right now. He's really funny. And people are like, God, like he's just like, she's sobbing and like be holding me. And he was like, oh, I'm like, you're crying over a cupboard shut. Like, I know, I'm crying over the cupboard shut too loud. And so just remembering, and you do lose that sometimes where it does go away and you're like, hold on. And you have to center and kind of pivot. But that's just something that we very much have found, that humor very much is a coping mechanism for me. And I grew up with, my mom is a huge family and we're all very sarcastic, and it's this whole thing. And just remembering that you can do both. And it is hard, and it is there's a privilege of mental health, of course, but for me, like, there is a choice of, you just have to remember it's a choice. And sometimes that's really hard when you feel really sick. But my grandma passed away a long time ago, but I was in high school, but she passed away from cancer, and they gave her 6 weeks to live. And she was like, I'm not doing treatment. I hate all of this. But she was just like, I'm having margaritas and lobster every day. And she would just say, why not to everything. And she just had she was just a badass about dying. And it was a really weird thing, but it was really cool to have that example of, just because it is awful. And, like the plane, like when you watch Titanic, and there were the people who panicked, and then there were people who were like, we're just going to sit in this bed and hold each other and just be okay with ourselves. And there's just that grounding moment of, just because my body's getting away from me doesn't mean I need to lose control of who I am. Because if my personality goes away, that's way more devastating than me passing out to me. So I'd be like, well, that sucks, because that feels like losing to me. That feels like me losing to Pops. It's like, I'm not going to lose who I am. I'm having a good time being alive. And just kind of backpedaling and figuring out how to line that back up.
Yeah. And like, I love how you mentioned that it's very intentional. What you're doing is that you make sure that you have somebody around you that knows ways to support you, that we'll always say that somebody supporting you when you're having flare-ups or bad health days, it doesn't have to always take the role of being an actual caretaker, which sometimes is helpful and you need it, but sometimes there's nothing you can do. There's nothing they can do. So providing you ways of taking you out of your head a bit of what you're dealing with from that is such a benefit, because it's not going to change the medical situation that you're in, but it just changes the headspace that you're in with the medical headspace. And that really can make such a big difference long term. We have our glossary, and one of our future terms is called, like, it's the 5-minute Adele syndrome. And so for that, we tell you to have the 5 minutes of listening to an Adele song that's very sad, melancholy. You're deep in the sad feelings, and you just let yourself front to back of that whole time period, feel it, embrace it. But once the song is over, we're not rewinding and going back to the whole. We're not doing that, but you're letting yourself acknowledge that something is bad, that you're dealing with, and it's frustrating. But then making the intentional choice, even if you're faking it to yourself, that you want to laugh about it. You can laugh and be like, that just is a sound coming out of my mouth, and I do not feel that laugh in the slightest. But at least you're doing it in a way you can kind of pat yourself on the back that you're trying with your health. And that's always, to me, is the best thing, is at least if you're trying with it, that it doesn't, if you look at your illness, we'll always say, as a teammate instead of your competitor. Your teammate can sometimes really suck and not do their job, and they literally let the ball drop on you, but they're competing in the game with you, not against you. And if you're fighting against the system, it becomes more of exhausting versus you fighting against your teammate, that you're like, can you please actually play the sport we're training in?
Would you show up to practice?
Yeah. I've been playing for 2 months without you here. Where are you? But I think that's a good point. I was going to say for you is there something that when you feel like you're having, I was going to end it on this segment, when you're having, it's a hard time for you to kind of feel like picking yourself out of those flare-ups, or when you're exhausted, is there something that has worked for you as kind of like a quick mood booster, or like a quick pick-me-up that you would tell people, like, oh, these kind of things have really worked for me in terms of kind of like letting myself kind of have a breather in the middle of something bad?
If my body's just super we're not doing anything today, Ryan Hamilton, Funny Face on Netflix, hysterical stand-up. It's my favorite. I know if I'm really sick, because my husband will just play it. And then sometimes it takes me halfway through, and I'm like, okay, I will now laugh. But I've just getting up and doing something, which is really hard some days. Like yesterday, I told you I'm getting over COVID, and I haven't been doing anything physical. And you kind of get used to not doing anything physical, and then it's kind of like, okay, maybe I can do something. And we got new pillowcases for our throw pillows downstairs, and I put those on. I was like, this is fun. This is who I am. This is stuff I do. I'm not the sick person all the time. And that was a whole mood booster for me. It's just doing something small that I can manage to do that doesn't drain from me. But yeah, for me, it always is like the first day of like, oh, like after a cold, like, okay, I can shower today. And just doing those really small tasks of just kind of climbing back to being a normal functioning human, or as functioning as one can be. But yeah, just doing small tasks is good for me.
Yeah, and I think that's great is trying, well, even for myself, I've had my health issues for 14 years now. It soon will be, I will be sick longer than I wasn't sick. So we're almost hitting that benchmark.
Gosh.
That'll be a
for
fun
you.
crossover. But it's so hard when you're on the slide. Even now for me, when you're on the slide of you're like, oh, now I have to go back again and start working back up with it. And it's less of the feeling of your health, and it's more your mind will go frustrated, being like, I've already done this climb 6 times. I don't want to do the climb anymore.
Yes.
So Mariah's like, this is what I feel.
But if I do this one more time, I'm gonna lose my mind.
And that's what I always have to remind myself, or what we'll always tell people is that that's a feeling that won't go away. No. And so you have to remind yourself that when you're frustrated about it, it's nothing that you've done or that you can't control. So when you kind of take yourself out of kind of the blame of it, and you're just like, this is what I've been given, this is what it is, and I'm frustrated now, fine, but I'm going to be frustrated while doing something. And even like you said, the small thing, which is helpful to like just do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, and like my husband, every once in a while, he'll be like, you're being really small, which for me is like the worst thing you can say to me. He'll be like, I didn't marry a small person. He's like, if he sometimes feel like I'm leaning more into the physical and I'm not being mentally tough or strong, where he's like, this isn't you. Like, what are we doing here? I'm like, that's true. And then he'll be like, or even if it's something, he'll be like, let's go to lunch, where it's something like he's going to drive. We're going to go to someplace we know, where it's just something small to kind of be like, okay, hold on. I can do this. And even if I feel sick, and I'm slumped over and I'm in the booth seat, kind of like, it's still something that it's like, okay, we can do something. It's a good mental reset to just do, something small. And if I'm really sick, he has to be there and help hold me or push me along the way. But just the little crawling out is good.
Yeah, that's a good place to end this segment before we go into our second half of the show, where you guys know I love, because it will soon be story time for everybody. But before we do that, as always, we just like to thank everyone who has listened or watched up until this point of the episode. We thank you because this is part of our virtual programming, and it definitely helps us we put our donate link below as a nonprofit. And so it helps us keep all of our programming and resources for free when people like yourselves support our nonprofit in any way, big or small. We always say even $1 makes such an impact of maintaining all of our resources and programming to be free for so many young adults who have chronic illness and disability throughout the world that we get to work with InvisiYouth. So we always thank you guys so much for donating if you can, for subscribing as well if you are able to do so. Like we said, it's one click. It's been 30 minutes. Have you done it now, guys? Have you clicked the subscribe button? Thoroughly would appreciate it. So like we said, thank you guys so much. And now we will go into the favorite part of our show. Everyone, it's story time. It is So That One Time.
So that one time.
All right, as always, guys, this is my favorite part, where I get to drink my coffee and have our guests tell us a story from life. So Mariah, the mic and floor is yours to tell us a story.
The one that always comes to mind, especially given the whole chronic illness thing, is so when I was a child, we were in a store called Shopko, and I have told this on my TikTok, but it is my family's favorite story. So here we go. And I grew up in a very conservative Christian household. And so, which is important, just keep that in mind. And so my mom's picking up prescriptions. I'm assuming it was for me, but they had this play structure, and it was like this big oval, probably like 10 feet wide. And then there was a little one, and my sister and I were playing on it. She's 3 years older than me. We're probably 6 and 9-ish, I think. I would like to say I'm younger, just to take off the burden of reality. And we're having a good time. She's in line, not paying attention. And I see this adult man and he's on one of the in-store scooters, which I had never seen before. And it's like, oh, that's super cool. And he's just kind of going around, and he's coming toward the front, and he's passing the pharmacy, and he goes to the front of the store, and then he just gets up. And I don't know about ambulatory, mobility aid users. I know nothing of this. I'm a healthy, we thought, 6-year-old. And he just gets up out of the little scooter, and then he just like leaves back, and I was, oh my gosh. And I have always been, this has always been the energy level. And I jump up on top of the thing. I'm like, it's a miracle. And I'm screaming top of my lungs, it's a miracle. And this was pre-pandemic. Everyone's in the stores. There's no online shopping. So there's probably like, I don't know, 40 people in the vicinity. And I'm screaming. And everyone's like, what's going on? And the guy, he worked there, I now know as an adult. And so he was just like by the checkout. And I'm, Mom! And my sister is very introverted. So she's like, this is so embarrassing. But I'm just so excited because I have witnessed God's miracle of healing in real time, just like they told us in Sunday school. And so then my mom is like, what is going on? He got up and he walked. Jesus healed this man. And so everyone's laughing. And then she was just like, honey, he works here. He was returning the cart to the front. Because I just assumed everyone in wheelchairs are, like fully paralyzed is what I thought at 6 years old, because there's no education on that. And so I was like, what? And she was like, no, like he's like probably like a very like healthy person. And so my whole family, now that I have to use a mobility aid, my mom and I, we were in the airport, and I was using like the complimentary wheelchair service. And I got up and I went to the bathroom, and she was like, I just want to believe somewhere in this airport, some little kid is seeing you and they're screaming, it's a miracle. And you're so excited. So if I do anything now, I go to visit my family and I have my rollator, and I'll stop using my rollator, and my aunt especially, she's like, it's a miracle. And it's this whole thing that's now very come full circle that I am now an ambulatory mobility aid user. And even though the guy wasn't one, he could have been, and I would have been just as jazzed and none the wiser. So now it's a little bit of just that moment of like, okay, now I am the person. And I just keep waiting for some child to be like, you've been healed. No, that's not what happened. Still super sick. Thank you so much. But that's always the family go-to laugh of me. And now we always just scream, it's a miracle anytime any like minuscule thing happens in our life. And it's,
oh my God.
So that is my story.
I thoroughly love that. 100%. When I started using a cane at different points, people who would recognize me without my cane and with my cane in the same place, it was always hysterical, because you would just see them looking like as if something had happened. And why are you now using it now? I just saw you a few days ago. And I was like,
what did I miss?
I was like, I didn't need it a few days ago. And like, but you I'm like, okay, I was like, God, like you said, I wish this was on television or something that they could just, put it in the background, like a little background actor, like moving in a wheelchair and then like getting up and sitting in the chair. That would just be great. Subliminal.
It'd be really easy. People are like, oh, that's the thing that happens. And just a non-event would be just beautiful to see. Because it's one of those things where like daily, because I mean, I'm 5'11" and people think I'm very fit. And then they see me and they're like, wow, did you get hurt playing basketball? What college did you play for? And I'm like, no, it's a and they're neurological. Oh no. And then people panic and then they leave, and you're like, okay. It's like, but if we could just have representation of this, which is why I'm very passionate about being like, this is me with my rollator. This is me without my rollator. This is me with my rollator. I didn't need it today. I need it today. One of those things. Cause because I just think that little 6-year-old me who is so confused about the world, needed to know that.
I love it. I love 6-year-old you just as much as I love present day you.
I'm so excited.
We're going to keep talking though, but when we go into our final segment with Mariah though, in our final one called Chat Me Up.
Chat me up.
Hey, wanna chat?
Chat Me Up is probably one of our favorite things to do. Obviously, I love talking, and so does Mariah. So this is going to be a fun time for both of us. But we want to be educating all of you guys on how you can entertain and be a part of those different communities, as we say, that of those who don't have chronic illness or disability, and how do we sort of share or gain that support from them or knowledge without having to get our PhDs and become doctors, as Mariah and I chatted about earlier in the show, and how do we do that? So one thing I was going to say is a big part, obviously your platform is like almost at 500,000 people following you. So with that, not all, you have a whole large audience that don't have chronic illnesses or disabilities on their own. So for you, is there a way that you are thinking when you're creating content going, I want it to still be enjoyable, but it's relatable without me having to read off the WebMD of what's actually happening?
Yeah. So something that I really try to do is to operate out of, I feel really bad comparing it, but oh well. When you hear Sarah McLachlan's voice and you know you're about to see a bunch of sad dogs and you're like, oh, here we go. And like, there's that little bit of you, like, I don't know, personally for me, I hear it and like, oh, here we go. Like, now I'm going to be sad.
In the arms of an angel is just said and you're ready.
I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to feel like I'm not doing enough in the world. It's going to be this whole thing. And I'm going to be guilt tripped into giving them money. Whereas if you were to see, I saw a TikTok the other day and there was this cute puppy and he's playing around and he's got like missing an eye, but they're just like throwing the ball and you just kind of fall in love with the little puppy. He's cute. And then they're like, oh, and by the way, he is up for adoption. You're like, well, now I care. That's adorable. Where it's guilt-free, where you're just enjoying it and it brings you that joy first. And then you're like, okay, but also an action item. He does need a home. And then, you have a whole bunch of more people who are way more receptive, where people, I mean, we don't like being guilted. We don't like feeling bad. We like feeling happy and good and all this stuff. We're very egocentric humans. We don't want to feel like we've done something wrong. And so for me, I try to do it where the joy is really important, because one, that's just who I am as a person. But when people see you, and it's a little bit of ableism, because if someone sees, oh, well, they're sick, that doesn't apply to me. Who cares? How could that possibly be relevant to my life? And so when you show them that you are an individual who has an illness, as opposed to I am my illness. And so I think both of those are really important for me, when it's just like, I am me. I do, no pun intended, but like stand alone from my POTS diagnosis and from my EDS diagnosis for sure. And I want you to know who I am. And then you might be like, well, now I do care about her a little bit more. So maybe I don't hate the fact that I'm going to listen to something about her and something that she struggles with and goes through. And so there's that. But then, there's also like, kind of trying to weave it in every once in a while, because it also is just a normal part of my day. And so it doesn't have to be this hallmark of like, and then you'll never believe what I have to do to go to bed at night, where it's just like, where it's just like, there's ways to make it more natural, because it's a natural part of my life. And I try to not sensationalize, because I think that's where you can lose people or turn people off, is if you do make it this really big thing. And there are things that are really big. But you have to be cognizant of your packaging this for people who that's not on their radar. They don't know why it's relevant to them. And there's also, I mean, everyone has internalized ableism. They're like, I just don't care. I don't want to hear about sick people. And they have that. And so you have to bypass those walls of like, I'm just going to tell you a very casual story. That like, you're going to walk in and be like, oh, shoot, hold on. What just happened? Where you just kind of want to make it as naturally woven in as you can, because it's a part of our everyday life, where they're the things like using a rollator. That's not sensational to me. That's my everyday life. And so you have to realize that might feel big to them. And so just packaging it in a way of like, that's not that big of a deal. It was a big deal when I first started. That takes a while to get there, but just making it seem as normal as I can is really big to me, because I feel like people learn more when they don't feel like they have to be on defense. Like, well, I am a good person. I care about sick people.
you never want the defense response. That's what
no one asked. And so I just try to kind of sneak it in there of like, oh, you accidentally learned something. Here we go. But for people who are chronically ill, they see it and they're like, same, right? Where you there's that balance of relating to my community and also trying to make it palatable and digestible to people who are not in the community, but we need their support and understanding. And I try to seek, I don't need sympathy. Like, I'm good. I'm figuring stuff out. And so I seek to have people understand me, not have sympathy for me. And so I try to angle things in vain. And so they don't feel like, oh, I feel so sorry for you, or like, oh, that's sad, where they walk away pitying me. Instead, they walk away being like, hey, so something I learned today, actually, did you know, where that's my goal. So that's where I try to operate from, and setting that intention of, I just want people to learn about this today. I don't need them to feel bad for me. It's not about me. It's just, this is reality. And I want them to understand that and move from there.
Yeah. And like you said, it's sort of, you make content and you share about your health in a conscious way to pique at people's curiosity, and not what is just naturally so many people's ignorance, because it's not seen in media and it's not discussed. So naturally, that is sort of their knee-jerk response. And if somebody feels they don't know something, another knee-jerk response is defensiveness, because now they feel that they can insult you because they don't know something. And that's where the panic always will come in with everything. So like you said, it's that real kind of line of showcasing something in a way that won't make people feel so bad for you or so bad that they don't know something. So you can always lean in a humorous way, or even in a realistic way, or we, like you said, sort of just like sprinkle in, we'll say, like sort of the healthy non-disabled thing that happened around your chronically ill disabled thing. So you're like, you're setting the trap, and then boom, they're there. You got them. So like you said, it's a good point. And we'll always, what other thing I was going to ask before we ended too was, I'll always, outside of the virtual space, when you're with people around you, like you had mentioned, your husband doesn't have an illness or disability, and you have family members or friends who don't too. So for you, are there ways that you've seen them become more comfortable asking you questions, or you feeling like you can share if something is in a bad health space without being like, oh, now they're going to feel like they need to take care of me, or they're going to feel bad if they know what's happening, before you say, I'm fine, and you're BSing it. So are there ways that have worked for you when you're around sort of that space to try to explain without like explaining it away?
It really depends on like how I view that person, where they are in my little, like, in a personal peripheral. Where like my husband has, I feel bad saying this, they're not going to see it. They don't know I'm on any social media platforms. And they actually made a joke about people who are on TikTok. And my husband and I were just sitting there, and he was like, oh, here we go. And I was just like, I don't even want to do this with them. But they're both doctors, and neither of them will ask me about my health. And I think it's super freaking weird, because they'll talk to my husband, and I'm like, okay, do neither of you know how to talk to a sick person? And they're like, this was in September, where I realized, where I was like, because every year in my life, I have a really good circle of people around me. And, I have people who, they might not be as close. Like, how are you doing? Like, are you feeling better? Like, what's that like? Or they'll ask, I feel like most people close to me, they'll ask really nice questions. And then every once in a while you get these people where like, they only talk to my husband the whole night. I was like, I know you guys are friends. I know I'm the wife here, but we are having dinner. Pretty sure we're about to buy you dinner, and neither of you are asking us any questions. And like my husband, after, I was like, they're doctors, and they wouldn't even talk, because they were like, well, she doesn't work well, that we know, so it's
not they're aware of.
Yeah, exactly. And we're like, I feel like there's that really hard disconnect, mainly more about people don't know how to engage with me other than my sickness, because like, well, what if you don't work, what do you do? So navigating that really is the trickier one, because people don't know what to do other than ask about health, and not nuanced questions, just like, how are you feeling?
Hope you're feeling better soon. You're like, well, that's a literal unrealistic goal, my friend.
Do you know what chronic means? So it's one of those things where I try not to take it personally, because it's just, we just aren't educated on any of this. And I try to think of where I was, even though I struggled with chronic illnesses, with like, I had really bad migraines growing up, and then I had inner ear disorder. And I try to think how I approached it, where it's not personal. People just don't know better. And so trying to figure out of like, they should know better because they're doctors. So that's kind of inexcusable in my mind. But just trying to take the ego out of it, has nothing to do with me as a sick person. They simply probably don't know how to engage with me, and they don't know how to do this. Or, if you don't know about POTS, you don't know it's neurological. Well, how is your heart doing? Right? Well, it's not really about my heart, where they don't know what they don't know. And so just to try to slowly have a lot of grace and hold space for people and not take it personally is where I really try to I did take dinner a little personally because I was like, I'm right in your face and you're not even interacting with me. I'm like a super fun person to be around, so screw you. But yeah, I think that's the hard part, is not taking it super personally, because there's usually no malintent behind it. They just have no idea what they're doing. Kind of like when you talk to a kid about it, like my nephews, you talk about it and like, oh, because Auntie Mariah is sick, that's why she has to have a scooter, right? Like, yeah, that's why I have to have a scooter.
You're like, in a nutshell,
have, because your legs get tired. I'm like, sure. Today we're just going to say, sure, you're 6. But just trying to hold that space, because I've noticed that if you get upset and you get defensive about it, then you're going to turn people off anyway. And it's, it sucks because it's an unnecessary burden we shouldn't have to carry. But at the end of the day, it's not going anywhere. So you just have to figure out, how do I manage these emotions better, of explaining my illness? Yeah, because then you're like, well, she's complaining a lot, or well, you're too positive about it. And so it's like, I don't know what you want from me. So I just kind of go off theirs, but try to stay true to like what I want them to know about what I have. And I'm not faking this, and this is a real thing. And like, oh, I had a really bad day, and they're like, oh, I know we were gonna get that personal. And you're like, I'm chronically ill, I have bad days, I don't know what to tell you, like, don't ask me next time. I don't know. It's an ever evolving case by case, I feel. I don't know.
And I
still.
think
It's weird.
because that's a good point to even make too, is we'll always say is to compare your chronic illness or disability experience that they might be asking about to something that's non-illness or disabled related. Because there's a lot of comparisons. We'll always say that you can be like, well, you like to watch this sport, and this kind of happens, when you watch these people play this. So this happens to me when I'm doing this. And then when you make the comparison to them, it's like, oh, okay. And it's an area they know, they don't feel uncomfortable with, they know how to interact with. So if you're able to then relate something that is a struggle to you to something that they could easily struggle with as a healthy non-disabled person, you're like, okay, we're meeting in the middle, I'm helping you out. But the way that you phrased it was really helpful too, for a lot of people to recognize, is that you meet them where they're at, but you try to educate them in a way that sort of is telling them about something that might be happening if they're curious, but then kind of fully putting in just like the rest of your day in the discussion. So it's like you said, it's a part of our full day, but people who aren't living in that similar experience, I never met a chronically ill person until I launched my nonprofit. So that was 8 years of me being solely around healthy friends and healthy people. So my whole pre-nonprofit was explaining and trying to dodge pity looks, which I still get. But in that, I've always said I can't get comparison and support from that population. That's not who I go to for it. So when they don't give it, you can't be disappointed. That's
absolutely, yes.
So if you like you said right out of the gate, well, it depends on each person and who they are to me. And I'll always say, if you start to feel frustrated by someone who isn't in the illness or disability space in your life, or even online, that you kind of check yourself and go, well, I know they haven't experienced this. I know I'm like the token one that they're dealing with. So I'm the only option. And if I'm with a rare disease, I am like screwing them, because they definitely have no comparison. So it is, like you said, knowing to them, I'm not going to them to gain that support of the experience. I'm going to them just for the full, not medical side of who I am. And then that kind of can give you the solace of being like, all right, I'll slowly inch the jargon into them, so it'll sit in the back of their head occasionally. So it might help them later when they ask me things in a month or two when I see them. But we'll work on it, and we'll keep knocking on the door, and eventually they'll get it.
Yeah.
I love that.
This is going to make sense.
One day
Maybe.
We won't be explaining this. Maybe. I've been doing this 7 years with InvisiYouth, so we'll see.
Your career is safe.
My career is safe, unfortunately. I always say one day I'm unemployed with this, and I will be thoroughly thrilled when I can reach unemployment.
Yes.
Oh my God, Mariah, I had so much fun having you on. This is probably one of the times I have laughed the most on this podcast, and I'm thoroughly appreciated it.
I had a very fun time.
And I want everyone to be able to find you on social media as well. So where can our listeners and viewers find you?
Magnolia Hill House on TikTok. There's also Instagram, but TikTok is more fun, and that's where I get into stuff way more. So
yes, and we're going to keep all of Mariah's links in the description and show notes so you guys can give her a follow as well. And as always, you can find InvisiYouth on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at InvisiYouth. Oh, and YouTube at InvisiYouth as well. We got handles now, so add that into my description. And you can find InvisiYouth Chat Sessions on all podcast platforms like Spotify, iTunes, and the whole thing. So thank you guys. Thank you, Mariah, for being on the show. And
thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you everyone for listening and watching. And I will speak with you soon. Bye, everybody.